Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I'm here with the British HODL.
Thank you for thinking of me and inviting me on. This is going to be an interesting conversation.
But hey, for those of whom they don't know you, do you mind to give us an intro and tell us about yourself?
I've always been an investor. I started working working in investments when I was 16 years old alongside my dad. My background's in real estate. That's what I first started in, and then equities, stocks, and then ultimately before Bitcoin, it was gold. And then after gold, I basically discovered that I had completely misunderstood what Bitcoin was. And then my eyes opened very late, in my opinion. But in 2020, my eyes opened to what Bitcoin was, and it just instantly clicked. So I started buying Bitcoin in April of 2020. And by November of 2020, I'd sold my entire gold position. And then by 2021, I started pivoting out of the majority of my equities positions too.
Real estate versus Bitcoin versus gold. Each one of those assets offers very different things, right?
The way I like to think about it is that it doesn't actually. That even though the assets have different benefits and risks and this, that, and the other, really, when you're an investor, you're only seeking one thing, and you're only seeking scarcity. That is the actual asset. The actual asset that you're buying, whether you buy stocks, real estate, gold, or Bitcoin, is scarcity. And therefore, you have to evaluate each asset in its ability to deliver scarcity to you. And you have to evaluate the risks and benefits of each particular asset. But ultimately, the underlying quality of each asset is scarcity. And so for me, Bitcoin is the most scarce asset on earth. And then I have to evaluate what is my risk profile, what are my cash flow needs, et cetera, to determine, what percentage allocation can I put into Bitcoin versus these other assets that might be less volatile, for example.
When I think about ownership, like real ownership, what is that you really truly own?
Ownership is a very interesting concept, right? Ownership has been one of these things that has been utilized in a way to basically make peasants happy, right? Because the wealthy, the powerful, and the elite, it's not really about ownership, right? It's more about control. And that's what every time anything has happened in the world where somebody powerful has made a move, it's been about controlling an asset. It's not really been about ownership. If I can control the debt that you have on your asset that you own, I control you. So therefore, I don't need ownership, I need control. Control is the highest form of ownership to a certain extent, right? Control is the North Star. Control is the gold standard of what you want. And if you study every tax regime in the world, and of course you live in Dubai, my tax residency is in Dubai, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. But if you study every tax regime in the world, taxes are based on ownership, right? And there's always legal, extremely legal ways to avoid taxes based on control. So this separation between control and ownership is very, very important. And yeah, I agree. What is ownership? Do you really own something? If somebody can get annoyed with you, go to a judge, sign a piece of paper, and then put a ring around it so you can't access it. Do you really own it? So ownership and control is something very, very important to think about.
What is money? What is ownership? What is an asset? For a long period of time, I thought it was okay, get a job, 9 to 5, and leave money on the bank. And then when you have enough to pay for a 10% deposit, buy a property and get a mortgage. Well, first of all, I don't think fiat currency is money. And second of all, as soon as you put it in the bank, you don't own it. So you lose both immediately.
Yep.
What options do you have? How do you save your wealth? How do you preserve your true money, your sound money? Then I read the Bitcoin standard and everything changed. Do you think it's too early to jump into Bitcoin? It's too late? How do you see the market at the minute?
I describe it like this. There is going to be, in about 5 years, we will look back on this time right now that me and you are talking at this very moment, and we will determine this time as a pre-Bitcoin spot ETF time and a post-Bitcoin spot ETF time. And the question will be for you is, or for anyone watching is, were you in before the spot ETF or were you in after the spot ETF? This is a monumentally important moment for Bitcoin. And I genuinely believe that if you are too late to this, if you sleep on this because you're too busy, trading or, trying to DCA, which is, I hate again, trying to do all of these limp strategies, thinking that you are going to acquire Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to price you out faster than you can imagine, because unfortunately for everyone, this is an actually finite asset. When if there's $1 trillion, for example, that's going to go into real estate, right? Governments have the ability to control the supply of that real estate in order to make sure the market stays stable. If there's too much sudden increase in too much demand, the government can respond by increasing permits for building, right? As an example. So they can balance out the supply and demand of real estate quite easily. Same thing with gold. I just issue more permits for you to dig more gold, and then you get more gold. So whereas with Bitcoin, you can't do that. So if the ex-managing director of BlackRock, who was talking at a conference in London, is correct, and there's $200 billion of demand in the first 3 to 5 years after a Bitcoin spot ETF, that equates to about $192 million per day of demand if it is equally spread out through the 756 trading days that you have. If that's the case, then you're looking at a day one Bitcoin price of $198,000 a coin.
There's going to be something called halving, right, in April, which means the supply is going to be cut in half. So that becomes interesting. Yes. So there's going to be a lot of people wanting to buy the asset, and there's going to be shock of supply, I think, because there's not going to be enough.
This is the first time that Bitcoin will ever experience a demand shock. We're used to supply shocks in Bitcoin, right? Every 4 years there's a supply shock. This is the first ever time in Bitcoin that you're going to get a demand shock. What do I mean by that? Well, in the last cycle, there was roughly about $40 to $60 billion that went into Bitcoin, right? 40 to 60 billion. That was it. Well, with an ETF, you get, and by the way, that went into crypto too, right? Which you obviously know more about than I do. A bit of that went into crypto. So let's just say it was 50-50, right? So you're looking at about 20 to 30 billion dollars that went into Bitcoin. Well, you're talking about unlocking $200 billion of demand because of this ETF. That's a 10x increase in demand. Supply goes down while the supply halves. So this is the scenario we're facing. Demand going up by 10 times while supply.
Like you said, it's early days. When you speak to some people, they say, oh yeah, but it's like you can divide Bitcoin into Satoshis. Yeah, but if you have one pizza, and you slice the pizza in micro pieces, it's still one pizza. Yes, you can divide in Satoshis, but it's still 21 million. So it's not
I mean, listen, my heart is not big enough for that. I don't talk to people as stupid as that. So I leave that to everybody else. If somebody can't understand that something is divisible by certain parts, that doesn't make it infinite, I don't talk to those people. Those are not the people that my YouTube channel is designed for. That they have a lot of basic learning to do, that they can get a lot better from a lot more kinder people than myself.
I do understand and I appreciate, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, can you just do some legit research before you talk about it? Because at the end of the day, depending on who you listen to, there are some people, they say stuff, I mean, Jamie Dimon, and they do something completely different.
If I'm a shareholder in JP Morgan, right, I want Jamie Dimon to manipulate the market in the legal ways that he can in order to increase my share value. He's doing exactly what he should do to support his shareholders. Larry Fink has taken the long side of the market, and there will be an equal or greater short side of the market. And Jamie Dimon is positioning JP Morgan to take the short side of the trade that Larry Fink is taking the long side of the trade. This completely makes sense. It's all drama, and it's designed for marketing. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love how you said it. There's going to be a prior ETF and post ETF. I love that kind of description, because that's exactly how I feel. So let me ask you something. So do you think January 5th, January 10th, which is the next window available, do you reckon it will be approved next year in January, the ETF?
I've been saying it's going to come in 2023. And if it comes, which the Bloomberg intelligence guys are saying that it's a 90% chance it's going to be here by January 10th on approval, I'll still say I was right because you're not going to take 10 days away from me. I agree with their analysis. They're the experts. They spend all day, James and Eric spend all day thinking about this, reading up on every single thing, using their Bloomberg badges to speak to people who are actually at these companies filing for these ETFs. I would be stupid if I said I can't lean on what they say. I think they're the best two people to follow when it comes to the ETF news and following that. And if they say 90% chance, I say I can lean on that.
I also believe January 5th to January 10th, we have 13 applications. I also think they will be approved all at the same time because they won't give someone advantage in the market. They will be like, I think, my opinion would be really bad to say, hey, BlackRock, you go ahead and everybody else waits.
In fact, if you believe that the SEC has a slightly vindictive bone in its body regarding the absolute ass whooping they received in court because of Grayscale, if you really want to hurt Grayscale a little bit, the best thing you can do is actually approve all 10 in one day, right? Because you can't just do one, because now you're opening yourself up to lawsuits. But the best thing you can do to hurt Grayscale a little bit is to actually approve all 10 in one day. Why? Because if Grayscale now has to compete on fees where they didn't have to before, because on day one, if the Grayscale fund comes in at a 0.9% a year fee and BlackRock comes in at a 0.4% a year fee, you'll see redemptions from Grayscale and injections into BlackRock. So that's the best way to actually say you to Grayscale after the lawsuit is actually to approve all 10 and allow the Hunger Games of the ETF to begin a lot sooner than they would have if you just approved one. Because everyone always focuses on the SEC giving BlackRock a market advantage, but nobody ever talks about how they can give Grayscale a market disadvantage. That's really what they could serve up quite easily here. All 13. How many you want? 27 ETFs? Let's go. Every single one of them on day one. Let go with all of them. Now, good luck, Grayscale, trying to compete with everyone.
If I think about the entire story, right, I think about, okay, Binance, which was the largest exchange by far, has got a new CEO, a lot of drama. CZ resigned. He's still stuck in the US, yada, yada. They have a new CEO, which is a...
Thank God.
Then you look into the ETF, okay, there are 13, 10 out of 13 are in Coinbase custody. Okay, interesting. So if you place all the pieces together, I mean, everything is going according to, I think I call it the plan. Strongly believe early January, like you said, late 2023, early 2024, they will have to approve it. And when that happens, then, I mean, if you remember I think it was 2004 when the ETF of gold was approved. If you look at the chart, I'll probably overlay it here. There's a humongous run for the gold.
8 years of up.
Exactly. And there is going to be an election in the US, which is always a good year, historically speaking. You have the halving next year, April. So everything is kind of aligning quite well to be...
It's quite surprising because everyone on Twitter seems to think that the SEC, BlackRock, and everyone else is too stupid to understand what a bunch of Twitter people understand. Clearly, to understand a little bit more than what people think, which is the video that I think where you were introduced to me, the video that K-Dub shared. And in that video, I very clearly say that BlackRock is smarter than a lot of people think. The fact that he's got, a couple hundred nerds that are fully paid every single day to figure out Bitcoin and figure out the best way to make money from it, should be letting people know that they know how the game works and they're here to make money. So if you don't think that they're going to, utilize every single thing that they can in order to make money, I mean, come on, you're just stupid. You're watching YouTube videos and Twitter and not realizing how the game works.
By the way, the video will be in the comments down below, guys. You have to go and check it out in case you have not seen it because you will miss out otherwise. Thank you for sharing it. Do you see space in your portfolio for something else?
I might buy some triple leverage NASDAQ call options. I might buy some, triple leverage S&P call options. I might buy some Bitcoin mining companies. I might buy some derivatives on Bitcoin at some point. I might buy some derivatives on Bitcoin mining companies. I'm sure that's what you meant by something else in your portfolio, right?
Something else as opposed to not crypto, but also something like, I don't know, Ethereum, other altcoins or anything?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't have time for I don't have time for all that mental masturbation. I don't have time to allow my wealth to be controlled by a guy who walks around with a unicorn bag in his hand. I don't have time for my wealth to be controlled by a bunch of sandal wearing nerds who are rolling around telling me that a receipt of a picture is worth $1 million. I don't have time for that. We're talking about serious wealth here. We're talking about people like my parents who have been immigrants to the United Kingdom, done the right thing for 40 years, right? And have been screwed over because the value of their property portfolio needs to be 50% more than it is, even though they've sacrificed and done the right thing. The value of their property portfolio needs to be 50% more than it is just to keep up with the amount of pounds that were printed. And they did this for their two sons, thinking that they were building a legacy while sacrificing the life that they were living. I do not have time for anything other than the best store of value. So no, I'm not focused on anything else. All the other will disappear at some point, or it will be swallowed by Bitcoin. But the main problem that humanity is facing right now is the financial subjugation that we've been under for 230 years. And we finally have a solution for that. And no, I'm not going to be wasting my time on receipts of digital pictures that I can right click and copy because I can trade it. There is no way I'm going to be losing my focus on the most important problem that every single human that is alive today and every single human that will be born in the future faces, which is how do you store the value of my energy for the long term?
I think the more you study Bitcoin specifically, the less you want to own other stuff.
The way that I say it, and tell me whether you agree with me or not on this, is Bitcoin is the only thing that actually has a solution. All of these other things are out here with the promise of a solution one day. It's worst because it promises to solve a new problem every 4 years, and that's how it stays relevant. So all of these other things don't solve any problems. And that, my friend, is a security, which is why they should be registered as securities, which is why I think Gary Gensler is probably one of the MVPs of Bitcoin for this last cycle.
One of the things that I like the most about Bitcoin is the fact that there is there is no CEO. There is no, I mean, whoever has he, she, or they, we don't know who they are, which is amazing. Whether everything else, you know exactly who they are, where they live, where they go to work, what they eat, what they post on Twitter.
Even the biggest hellhole of coins that was out here trying to evade everyone in the world by being all over the place and nowhere at the exact same time, I'm talking about Binance, was brought to heel by the United States of America. That's why the regulatory environment in the United States is the premier jurisdiction in the world, because they have the ability. Now, I'm sure a bunch of your fans and your audience that are in the cryptos are going to call me statist, call me XYZ for supporting what's going on. But I'm from the traditional asset world. I think that securities laws should be violated. They're there for a reason. I think sometimes they are unfair, for sure. But on the whole, they do provide a lot of value for safety and security, because I do not want, an auntie or my grandma or my mom or my dad falling for that they see on the internet because they clicked on something wrong and now they speculate a bunch of their money. Now, a lot of people say, you're not for free markets, right? We can argue the point. We can argue that point. We can argue that whether I am for free markets or not. I always think that there should be a ring fence and rules to a market that everyone understands, and then you play the game. And everyone has seemed to manage to play the game for the last little bit of time that the securities laws have been around, and there have been a lot of winners in that environment, starting right from the bottom. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the existing securities laws that you have in the United States. How they're enforced, we can debate, and whether the person enforcing them is good or not, we can debate about that. But the securities laws in the U.S., I think, are pretty robust, and they have to be followed. And now I'm glad that the SEC and Gary Gensler have managed to basically bring to heel the biggest violator of those securities laws in the world.
If you look into the market, for example, you have players like Coinbase. They follow the rules. They were more kind of into what the SEC wanted them to be. So then at the same time, you have other players, they don't have any KYC, they operate where they want, they don't have any HQ legally. So then it's not fair for, like, I agree with you, like the market should be somewhat regulated. And there are people with a lot of money, they are waiting for those regulations before they step into it. Because if the market is wild west, you will have no people you will have only retail, us playing the roulette, right? But the big money, the real money, they're waiting. That's my opinion. They are here waiting for regulation. Say, okay, is it safe now? Okay, let's go now. Let's go. And then you will have the prior ETF and post ETF like you painted. So we need those regulations to come in place, because otherwise people with money won't play the game. That's what I think. If you understand what the problem Bitcoin is trying to solve, or is solving already, if you ask me, well, there is nothing else.
Yeah.
And the only way I like to see it, which is probably where we differ a little bit, is like I like to take a portion of my portfolio and speculate with it. But it's a very small portion. And I can tell you, it's been shrinking quite heavily. And the main reason is because not even the speculation itself, because, I can go to a casino and have fun and have a cigar and play on the roulette. That's not a problem. The problem is like I'm not buying Bitcoin with it. This is where it hurts me the most, because once you understand that this is the most precious, scarce, and beautiful asset, every dollar I put somewhere else, I'm not putting into Bitcoin. That's the part that bugs me. I don't know if it makes sense, but hey, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, man.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. See you in Dubai.